The first of the most recent eras of terrorism was kind of internet fueled. This whole thing is social media fueled. It's different. It's got a different kind of technological enabling to it.
Back on America's Forum with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth on the anchor desk, and remaining with us throughout the hour from Newsmax Washington, my former colleague and the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. And folks, we just heard Ashton Carter, the new Secretary of Defense in Kuwait, addressing the troops, and he mentioned specifically the acumen of ISIS with the use of social media.
Yeah, ISIS has effectively used social media platforms to recruit members worldwide and even to encourage individual attacks in nations outside the core in the Middle East. And
mindful of that, Pete Hoekstra, you know, I don't know if this took us all by surprise, but I guess in retrospect, it is a natural extension of the use of the internet in this information age. Given your background in intelligence, having chaired the Intelligence Committee, when did you first become aware of the importance of social media in armed conflict and as an aspect or used by terrorists?
Well, actually, J.D., it's not a surprise at all. We had a hearing on this back in the time frame of 2005, 2006. They were using the media at that point, social media at that time already. They just continued to build on it, and they've gotten very, very good at using social media to move their objective forward.
Well, mindful of the use of social media, we are pleased to welcome in, for an in-depth analysis, Rabbi Abe Cooper, who is the Associate Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. The rabbi joins us via telephone from Los Angeles. Rabbi, I understand that you're meeting with leaders from Google, YouTube, and other social media giants to try and combat the use of social media by these terror groups. Have you had those discussions yet? And what strategy do you think these media giants are going to take?
Good morning, JD. Thanks for having me on. I'm going up to the Silicon Valley to have the next series of meetings. We've had a project called Digital Terrorism and Hate for the last 20 years, and you know, we can see.
It seems we have some difficulties with the phone call from the rabbi. We'll try to reestablish that contact. In the interim, Peter, you always have, and this is the latest manifestation of trying to strike the balance between liberty and security. On one hand, we don't want to see the internet in any way tightly controlled, but on the other hand, you've got social media being used to try and kill Americans. Pete, how do we strike the balance?
Well, I think here you have, there's no reason to strike a balance at all, JD. These are our enemies. We have the capabilities through NSA and, you know, with these corporations that are headquartered, not necessarily in the U.S., but are headquartered in the West. They have a shared responsibility along with our intelligence communities to do everything they can to shut these organizations down and to combat them in cyberspace. We can do it. We can do it effectively. Again, the question is there the will to strike them at the heart of a unique capability that no enemy we've ever faced before had?
Pete, I want to ask you, do you think that the reason why ISIS and these other terror groups are using social media is because they're trying to target more of those young, isolated, somewhat misfit kids out there?
Well, I think it may be some of the isolated individuals, but hey, they're willing to target anybody that may be receptive to their message. You know, as we've had the discussion last week where, you know, the spokesperson at the State Department said, you know, we need to get these people jobs. And when you take a look at the profile of many of these jihadi fighters, ISIS fighters, they're not coming from the isolated communities, and they're not the isolated. Many of them come from middle-class homes and those types of things. They're using social media because it's available and it can be effective either for recruiting or for inciting these people to attack in the homeland.
Well, mindful of all that is at stake, there are other questions about the use of the internet and about cyber attack. And so we're going to step aside here for just a second. Pete Hoekstra, when we come back, we're going to ask you for your insights on some new reports about, for all intents and purposes, a very active cyber war that is being waged against the United States and counterattacks in cyberspace from our own nation. All in that and more is ahead here on America's Forum. Welcome back. One of the ironies of the internet age is at times the technology fails. That's why we're so pleased to report to you that we have been rejoined, albeit via telephone, by Associate Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Abe Cooper, who is in Los Angeles, and hanging in from Newsmax Washington, my old colleague Pete Hoekstra. Rabbi, before you were rudely interrupted or cut off by problems with technology, we were talking about what you folks were doing to get with the internet giants and try to rein in the use of social media by terrorists. Could you elaborate? We'll pick up where we had to leave off in the first segment there.
Well, let me keep this focused. The challenge right now, the biggest challenge right now, is that ISIS and the other terrorist groups have deployed and are, as we speak, deploying brilliant marketing strategies in order to, get teenage girls to come from London and, recruits to come from across, literally around the world. And a core part of their food chain is Twitter. An hour after the killing of the two assassins, the Charlie Hebdo incident, you had hashtags, you had their pictures up across Twitter. These are heroes, these are people worth emulating. So what we need to do is we need to get Twitter especially, but all the other big boys in the block, to roll up their sleeves and help us degrade the capabilities of ISIS and the others online. Won't remove them, that's not possible. But right now, they're just taking everything we're giving them and more or less running the show in terms of news, in terms of, and especially recruitment of young people, targeting of others, fundraising. We've been meeting with the companies, Facebook, for 5-6 years, which is probably the best one on the block. They do have people on this issue. They have rules. If you show them the problem, the stuff will be removed. The worst in the block, unfortunately, still is Twitter. And on March 18th, next month, we're going to be putting out a report card about each of the companies, ranging from Facebook, Google, YouTube, all the way to Twitter. Just give one example. Everyone's talking about the threat made against the malls in the United States and around the world. That was released on YouTube. There's no excuse for a company to have rules that would allow terrorists to openly use their platforms in order to, to spread their propaganda. So make it clear, in the real world, we hope that the United States will lead, an international effort to kill as many of those terrorists as possible. But there's another war online, and we're not going to win it just with governments. I can't tell you that 2 days ago the French Minister of Interior went up to the Silicon Valley. I know for sure the top German officials have done so. Anybody in the front line of this battle knows that if we can't get the companies who run the social media empire into this mix, we cannot win this war.
Rabbi, we need to win this war, from a technology standpoint. The other way we need to win the war is, we know that Boko Haram, last summer took 200 girls. Over in the last 24 hours, ISIS has captured 60 to 70 Christians in Syria. And in between, there's been all kinds of these atrocities. What is it going to take to get the Christian community, the Jewish community energized to start advocating on behalf of persecuted religious minorities around the world at this point?
And well, I Rabbi, about 45 seconds to answer. Sorry, sir.
Yesterday, I also had a horrific briefing from the Yazidis, where they have 4,000 girls and women that have been kidnapped. Look, those of us who are religious, I'm a rabbi, we have a moral and historic obligation to speak out against endangered religious minorities, but so do people who do not yet believe in God. This should be a fundamental human rights issue for 2015 to make sure that everybody can go and pray as they see fit and come home without being blown up or kidnapped or raped.
Rabbi Abe Cooper, as you were saying that, mindful of your affiliation there at the Simon Wiesenthal Center and mindful of what we heard in the wake of World War II, never again. Sadly, it appears steps are taking us down that same path. Rabbi, thanks for your info on how you work to combat this. We look forward to talking to you again soon, and America's Forum will continue right after this.